it to you. But now it's not only about numbers. Now it's also about what is behind the numbers. So he will give us an insight, and then we will discuss it further with the panel.
Here. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I want just to have a personal story to tell, but it's probably a long story of equal access for women to a very important sphere of the life of women and men. So, women and men are not being equally in sports throughout times. The first women that participated in the Olympic game was only in 1900, and they were only participating in 5 sports, and they were only the 2% of people who participated in this Olympic game. Then in the year, in further year, one by one, new sports were included into Olympic games. But it was only in 1990 that the first women entered into the executive board of the International Olympic Committee. So only in 1999, almost one century. And the very year later, in 1991, it was made a very important decision. And then any new sport included into the Olympic game had to include events also for women. But actually it was only in 2012 that women reached equal access to all the disciplines in the Olympic Games. So more than 100 years to get equal access for women in sports in the Olympic game. And this is our very few figures to say that sports is still, it has been for many, many years, and is still a sphere in which men are still dominating. They are still the majority of people that practice sport, but also specifically they are still in the best position in all the decision-making processes. Sport is not only, of course, a problem of a matter of health. It's not only a matter of fun or relaxing. It's also a very specific and important, let's say, as a symbolic role in the society, because millions of people practice sports, and specifically boys and girls practice a lot of sport, and they need, from the very beginning, to have some men and women to be referred to in their life, and it is very important, specifically for girls, to have sportswomen that inspire in their life. And of course, it's not only important to have women in sport, but it's also important to have women in the decision-making body, because sports is one of the sphere of the private life of people in which stereotypes, gender stereotypes, are still very, very strong, very, very strong. And for that reason, we think that sports, it's one of the 3 dimensions that are very relevant to be included into the subdomain of social power, that was theoretically included since the very beginning of the index, but due to the lack of data, it's been a refrain today, this problem of lack of data, but only in the last few years we have been the opportunity to collect data in this very important subdomain. And no? Okay, maybe here. Yes. And this is the new configuration, let's say, of the domain of power. So with political power and economical power, we have included sports, media, and research in this subdomain of social power. Now I just want to show you the figures that should be very shocking, at least for us. So this is the first figures. referring the indicator that we have been using to measure the presence of women in sport. The indicator is referred to the presence of women in the boards of the 10 most popular sport organizations representing Olympic game, representing countries in the Olympic game. So this is a result that probably much more than the result of index should be disappointing you. So only 14% of women are present in this board. And the situation is very bad also in all countries. Only Sweden reached the lower bound of what we call the gender balance zone. So only Sweden reached 42 actually. And the lowest is Poland with 3%. But as you can see, the majority of member states are really low performing in this indicator. And another relevant characteristic of social power, starting from sport, but we will see also in the other dimension, is the very high vertical segregation that the higher is the position and the lower is the number of women in this position. In sport, for example, in this coupled with this 40% of women, only 5% of women are president of this board. So let's say, and actually in number, only 14 women out of 280 people are president of this sport organization. The second dimension we included into the social power is media. We are increasing a little bit the score. No, this is not actually a score, this is a percentage. But the media is another important sector that shows social norm, value, attitude. And again, this is another indicator, an additional indicator that it's measuring the presence of women in the boards of the national broadcasting, including TV, radio, and news agencies. So, and this is the percentage of women in this board. Again, here we can see that only 6 countries, I think, Romania, Luxembourg, Ireland, UK, Sweden, and Bulgaria are reaching more or less the gender balance zone. Actually, Bulgaria is overwhelming because, again, there are 65%, I think, of women in this board. And but the majority of member states are even lower than 1/3 of women in this board. But the most important things and figure I want to show you is that if you look at the pyramid of power in the media, it's very shocking in some way. So 67% of graduates in journalism or communication information are women. So there are a lot of resources at the basis of the pyramid to feed the sector of media. But only, again, 32% of women are in the boards. This is the indicator we are actually using in the index. And the higher we go, only 22% of women are president of this organization, and only 14% are CEO in this organization. In a reverse way, look this figure. So at the top of the pyramid, let's say we have 1 woman out of 6, 1 woman and 5 men. And this is again a characteristic of sport, media, but also in research, as we can see right now. The final sphere we are including in the social domain, it's the research funding. Research is another really relevant sphere of the life because research and academia produce knowledge. So through research, research is able to influence values, role, and to also include gender roles, gender perspective into the research and in the knowledge. Again, here we are measuring, in this case, the board of the largest, the main board of the largest institution that at national level finances research and organization, financing basic, fundamental and applied research. Generally speaking, in general national council or research in so many member states. Sometimes there are also ministers, but this is the highest institution that a member state finances research. In this case, the board are composed around 40% of women. But again, if we go ahead with the president, only 27% of the president are women. In a situation in which graduates are more or less 50-50, 50% women, 50% men. Again, we have a lot of resources at the end, at the base of the pyramid, and women face barriers to increase in their position in control funding. Here we can see the situation at member state level. So there are member states that step forward in this area, in this sphere, even much more as Italy and Romania. In Romania, exactly 27% only of the members are men, but there are a lot of member states in which the presence of women is very, very low. 1/3 of the member states, women are less than 33%, and 2 member states, Estonia and Hungary, are actually at 0 level. So no women in this board. These 3 indicators compose the social power subdomain. It is one of the 3 subdomains of power. And these are the final result, the score. These are score. So in the social power subdomain, at the EU level, we reach 55 points. Actually, is the highest among the 3 subdomains compared to political and economic, but there are really much more to do, because again there are a lot of countries right below this score. Just after a few numbers, just to conclude, this subdomain, this sphere, sports, research and media, are really strongly dominated by men, in a different way, in a shocking way for sports, but they are really strongly dominated by men. And but the evidence that from other subdomain, political, economical subdomain, show us that change is possible. Doing things, legislative action, awareness campaign, debate in public can move forward gender equality in power. So if something has been done for political and economical, we think that it's possible to do also in sports, media, and research. Finally, I think that, again, it's important to me, as I'm the man of data, of course, but we have made a lot of effort in the last 2-3 years to get data to populate this subdomain. Internally, EIGE, we have collected data specifically for sport and research, actually. And now we are in the position to deliver you this result, very important result, to you in the sense of public opinion, policymaker, because now we are in the position to measure improvement in the next year. We will get on collecting new and better data for this domain, maybe also expanding also other spheres of social life, but we are in the position to measure the improvement in the next year. So now it's time to action. Thank you.
Thank you, Davide. And now I will ask on the stage our panelists who are now representing all these three areas of social power that we've been discussing. So first of all, Rolf Tarrach, can you please join me on the stage? He's the president of the European Universities Association, so he's our academic. I have been told that he knows everything about physics and he knows everything about how to get research funding. So you're very welcome to join us in the panel today. Our second panelist is Paulina Tomczyk. She represents the European Elite Athletes Association. She's a big supporter of women athletes, and she's also a positive example here on how a woman can make a career within sports. And I must mention that she has a black belt in judo, which is her sports career. And our third panelist is Edith Stohl. She's changing hats now. So you've already seen that she's a great conference moderator, but she's also a representative of the Austrian public broadcasting company, where she's an editor. She's also a president of the Female Journalist Network, and she's a member of EIGE's Journalist Thematic Network, which gathers journalists from different member states. We've got a few others here in the room, which is one of our ways to promote and raise awareness on gender equality among citizens. So we've got quite interesting statistics that we've seen from Davide on the screen. Would you like to start with an opening statement on how you feel about it from your own area? Maybe you will start from the academia world.
Yes, but allow me to make a few remarks to what has been said. To what has been said before.
You can absolutely do that.
Well, first, a little note of optimism. I think, most of the people were not happy with going from 62, I think, to 66.2 or whatever it was. Now, I think we should not forget that 130 years ago, 50% of the universities would not accept women. And 70 years ago, there were a few countries, among them, I think this one, which would not allow women to vote. So one should not forget the perspective of where we are today. I'm not saying that there are no problems. There are problems, but it's not as bad as all this. Now, my second point here is that some inequalities, I'm not sure they are as bad as you see them. In academia, it is well known that women prefer, and here I'm touching research, prefer life sciences to physical sciences, and with men it's the opposite. They prefer physical sciences to life sciences. Now, I'm not sure anybody in academia or in research wants to equalize these indicators. I mean, to have as many women doing life sciences as physical sciences and the men the same. I think our attitude is rather to give the same opportunities. If women prefer to do life sciences and be active in life sciences, give them the same chances as men have in doing physical sciences. So there's a question of not having everything equal necessarily. It is more a question of fairness towards the individual. No? Another point is that some of these indicators are correlated. Now, you never should use correlated indicators or avoid them as much as possible because they do not add information. If you have strongly correlated indicators, they give the same information. If you have 5 of them, you count them 5 times, and you're giving 5 times the same information. And the example, of course, is if you work less, you earn less. So saying that you earn less, if you forget that very often it is because you work less, is not adding information. So that's what we need. And by the way, that is something I would like to ask you because we badly need it, is data on earning less ceteris paribus, when all other things are the same. Because when I discuss with people about this earning less, the answer is always, that's because you work less. So we need data on when they work the same, the circumstances are the same, the education is the same, the circumstances of the job are the same, then then they earn less. And that is a serious discrimination. Then we will be much better in fighting against that. And then a last point about this before I go to that. In power, I'm missing the power of religions. And I'm very surprised because, certainly religions are powerful. I think more than 50% of Europeans believe in a God outside our brain and believe in some religion. And they are powerful structures, and they have a hierarchy, and there is cardinals, and there are rabbis, and there are imams, and so on, and you can count how many women there are. Very often you will say 0, but by giving these data, you put a little bit of pressure on that, and we will not get this equality without touching up on that issue. I know people don't like to talk about that, but that's it is. That we have to tackle one day. Now about research, I have to tell you an anecdote. I'm sorry. Let me tell you an anecdote. I was head of the Spanish Research Council for a certain number of years, and I said, okay, from now on, in each jury, there will be at least one woman. 2 or 3 ideally, because that would mean 50% of juries of 5 people, but at least one. Very soon I discovered that was not possible because, for instance, in chemical engineering, there were not enough, there was only 1 or 2 women eligible according to the rules of the Spanish system. And when I called this lady and she said, no, come on, I'm sitting in all kinds of juries. I have no time for my own research. If I sit in that, that will take me 1 month and you will tell me then that I'm not doing research. So these things have to be taken into account what the reality is when that has to do with quotas and so on. Also, when it comes to the number of rectors, you haven't given that because although rectors and presidents and vice chancellors are associated in all countries to research. If you go to the number of female rectors, it is very low. It is between 10 and 25%. But if you ask female professors and the male professors how many wanted to become rectors, then the chances of women are a little bit better than the chances of men. And that is what I call fairness. So, let me... Clinical trials, one thing which was discovered some 7 or 8 years ago in a group of people, we worked on that, is that in clinical trials, again, research, they are made very often only with men. You develop a new drug, you try it, you have phase 1, then phase 2, phase 3, so you start with 15 or 30 people, and then at the end you have lots of people, Very often at the beginning, the first phases, they are used only done with men. And then there is the assumption that, it will work for women, and there are huge surprises with that. Mm-hmm. So that's an extremely unfair treatment of the right of women also to that if there is a new drug in the market, to make sure that drug is also good for women. Anyhow, with the data here, there are very many other things I would like to say, but with the data here, I'm not too sad. 60-40 is not bad. That's what you call the comfort zone. Yes, the presidents, that's a little bit worse. In the institution I was president, there has never been a woman president. When I left, the minister asked me to suggest a certain number of persons, and that was a list of 6, and there were 3 women in the list. But he chose a man, and the next one who used the same list, he chose another man. C'est la vie. Can't do much about that.
Okay, I'm hearing that there will be probably some questions to you from the audience. So thank you very much for this insight from the research world. But before we go to the questions, I would ask maybe Paulina to talk a little bit from the sports world.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So, as we have seen, the results in sports are not great. to be honest, for me, as I am working in sport, I was not shocked. Unfortunately, I was not shocked. I would expect that. I was a bit surprised that I would expect them to be lower. I think like the higher we go, the worse gender balance is. But I will develop on that a bit more. But actually, I would like to start by bragging a little bit on behalf of my organizations, because since we have focused a lot on gender equality and the decision came in 2015, we now manage to have 3 women on our board of 8 people, which gives us almost 40%. So we are almost in the gender balance zone. We are very happy about that. And these women were elected and not appointed. So this is something very important for us, because it's true that in the sports sector, which is traditionally dominated by men, both when it comes to participation and to governance, you really need a strong commitment in order to make a change. And I also think if we ask ourselves how can we change those numbers, I think we cannot forget about the competence of EU when it comes to sports. As we all know, it is not a strong competence. It is the competence to support, supplement, coordinate, right? The actions of member states. And for example, if we have the conclusions from the Council on Gender Equality in Sports, it says that the Council encourages sports organizations to work on gender balance on executive bodies, which is rather, I would say, it's a very soft document, and it's a rather weak message. It is not a legislative measure. And from the other hand, the sport governing bodies, they use the doctrine of autonomy of sport governing bodies, and they prefer to be self-regulated rather than allow any public bodies to get involved in their governance. And we have to remember that already the International Sports Federation and Olympic movement are really powerful. I don't think I have to expand on that, but national sports federation can be very powerful too. So at this point, it is not always that obvious to do the political pressure. So the legislative measures are a bit limited, and also the political pressure is a bit limited. And these are the 2 points that have been mentioned as a possible means for progress. It seems like for the real progress to be done in the sport governing bodies, we do need a real commitment from the organizations. And sometimes it seems like there is just void declarations and PR moves from those bodies rather than actual changes in their policies, in their culture, and in the traditions. Because I would argue that the figures in the that has been presented, they are symptomatic of something more broad, which would be the general position of women in sports, and the consideration and respect for women's sports, for athletes, and so on. And I think you don't have to really be interested in sports to see that the media coverage, for example, the stereotypes and the violence against women, this is something that in sports is a huge problem. But also there is another thing that I would like to point out, which I think is not properly addressed at the EU level, unfortunately, and it is the equal treatment of sports men and women at the highest level. So what I mean is, when we talk about general EU strategies, the equal economic independence and equal pay for equal work, these are the first priorities, and very rightfully, I would say. It's obvious that work is a very important component of independence and gender equality. And we have to remember that for professional athletes, sport is their work. Sport is not just some fun activity that we do, it's actually their work. There is a lot of examples, but I will be very brief about them because I think I already extended my time a bit, where we see that women are discriminated against. We have examples where in some countries, in some sport, women do not have the professional status, and there are different rights which are correlated to that status, while the men playing the same sports at the same level had that status, which is it's pure discrimination. It's the same when it comes to women that don't receive any kind of recompensation for their performances or receive a very low salary, below the minimum wage, if they don't have any kind of written contract. And then it's very hard to talk about pay gap, because are these women even included in the figures? If they don't have a contract, they kind of receive some kind of money, but sport governing bodies or their clubs, they don't want to see them as professionals. So it's very complicated, I would say. And there are more examples. Like we have, for example, our affiliate from Spain, who has informed us that lately clubs in Spain, they have been introducing so-called anti-pregnancy clause, which basically said that if a woman becomes pregnant during the contract, the club has a right to terminate the contract unilaterally. Which, of course, is illegal when you go to court with that, but we know that it's not always that obvious to pursue your right in a court, and it's also shows just the lack of respect in general. So, I mean, I think this is something that should be taken into account as well, because I think that these examples of bad treatment and discrimination, they don't get enough of attention from the EU and from the member states and also from the sport governing bodies. It is important when we talk about girls' participation in sport and participation in sport in general, because the female athletes at the elite level can really be role models that would encourage girls to do more sports. And I think the way they are treated, it can actually either encourage or discourage women from getting involved in sports, and that also relates to trying to pursue the top positions in governing bodies. So yes, I think these are my main points, and thank you.
Thank you. Then Edith, from the media world, how does it pyramid of power? How does that look from your perspective?
We have seen the figures, and I would talk about my perspective out of the ORF, the Austrian Broadcasting Company. What we did together with a colleague of mine, she's here today, she was the mastermind behind it, Christiana Jankovic. We established an equal opportunity plan, which is not, something very mystical, but something very determined. And the main thing in this plan was the quota of 45%. So I have to say, yes, I am for the quota, because it's the only measurement you get women in higher positions. And men always are so against the quota, but I think men always already had the quota. In every gremium you look at men, you have the men from the right, from the left, from the upper class, from the lower, from the countryside, from the village, from the town, you always have to have a certain mixture. And nobody ever talks about this quota. Everybody thinks this is so much right. Anyway, with our plan, we got a little bit further. And it's maybe also like here a slow path, but it's in the right direction actually by now. But I think it's only for a short period of time. On the board of directors, we have 2 female and 2 male. But it's going to change again to the worse. I know that. What did it help for our program? In the talk shows, actually, we have since then also quotas that it's not possible to have, or almost not possible to have a talk show without female guests. But if you look at the other program, nothing has changed really. You still can see documentaries where there's no women existing. You can see movies, everything where there is no women and men don't even realize. One example is there is a simple test which is called the Pestle Test. You ask, is there more than one woman? If so, do they talk to each other? And if so, do they talk about something else but men? So you will be really surprised how many movies, especially from Hollywood, won't pass the test. About 70%. And from my own work thing, I tell you a little story, and then we carry on. We had a documentary purchased, which was called The Vanishing of the Neanderthals. So I was watching the documentary, not a single woman. So I said to my male colleagues, we don't need 45 minutes explaining why the Neanderthals vanished and not the Homo sapiens. We can tell in 30 seconds. They didn't find any women. Okay. So we tried to change it. I found a female expert on this topic. Nobody thought about this one before. And this is a little sharing of my experience from my work life. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to say thank you for our panelists for their interventions. I'd like to go back a little bit what Rolf was saying here in the beginning, and saying that sometimes women just don't want the job. So there is a job available, but they are not available. They don't want to take that extra stretch and do that. Do you have something that you'd like to comment on that from the sports or from the media part?
I mean, the simplest answer to that I would have is just, if you don't think that it's possible to reach the position, maybe you're not even going to try, because you know that the culture is such that you would fail, so then you don't even set your mind to try to do it.
Mm-hmm. I can respond to that also by asking a lot of women for an interview, for example. It's always said there are no female experts, which is not true. But then you have to find them. And you have to convince them, to give you the interview. It's not like every man would talk on every topic. The women think, oh, I'm not good enough. Tomorrow my child has some test at school. I haven't been to the hairdresser. I mean, there are some millions of reasons why she just wouldn't do it. But if you have encouraged her once, and then you call up again, then I'm sure she will do it. So it's not like there are none. It's just more difficult to approach them.
But if we still focus on the power and the people sitting there in their black suits in the boards, what's stopping women finally? How can we change that? Why don't we have more women in the boards and in taking actually the decisions?
I think it has to be like a plan from the bottom and from the top. The management has to be convinced that it is absolutely necessary you have women there, and also the staff and the workers and everybody else. It has to be a real goal, and if everybody is working on this issue, I think it's possible.
Well, you see, I mentioned that at least in academia, and the same happens in banks, it is not true that the number of women today, that hopefully will change, prepared for that is the same as the number of men prepared for that. To be a rector in very many countries, you have to be professor. Now the number of professors, female professors, is much lower than the one of male professors. So this is just a statement. I mean, I know that everybody or many people has misunderstood me, but what I'm saying is something extremely obvious. I mean, it's just a question of quantity, and that will take years to have higher quantities. That soon. I mean, I know a couple of. In Spain, a couple of women who were appointed into the boards of the two largest Spanish banks, and I know how they suffered. They suffered, and I know what they had to do. So I mean, it's very easy to say, well, you just sit in a board, and you say something, and it's very easy, and you get a huge salary. No, it's not like this. And then don't forget that there are zillions of men who don't want these jobs. When I became president of the CSIC in Spain, most of my colleagues said, well, now you're really getting old. I mean, you're giving up research, you're giving up teaching, you're giving up what makes us really, in academia, and you go there and waste your time. So it's not as easy as that.
So you're saying that it takes time. That is them. Mm-hmm. What about in the sports?
I would agree that it takes time, that for sure, and it takes, as you said, a lot of work from the bottom, from the top, because I don't think that only concentrating on quotas on boards would actually solve the problem. We also have to work from the bottom. And I do think we really, especially when it comes to sport, we really do need to change culture about it and the stereotypes and the way we talk about women in sports, but also in the way that we talk about men in sports, because they have some gender stereotypes towards them as well, which are a bit related to the discussions on health that we talked before, and especially mental health and being tough as an athlete, as a male athlete, is very, very strong. So yeah, I think it is going to take time, and it's. But also, I think we can do more trying to really monitor the progress and putting the political pressure, especially on the bodies that do care about public opinions. And I think the sport governing bodies, the big federation and so on, they should care. They should care about the image that they have, and if they have, they are supposed to represent certain values which are important in the society. We should be able to check if they are actually pursuing them. Mm-hmm. And if something is wrong, we should be able to say that and pressure them to make changes.
Okay, we've got one question coming from Slido, and that relates to the gendered connotations that we have for specific fields that were also referred to here. And the question is that is giving equal opportunities enough to give men and women equal access to specific educational fields, because these stereotypes and gendered connotations play such an important role? So should we do something more, or is it enough just to give the equal opportunities? I think that's for you. Yeah.
What I said is to give equal opportunities to reach your goals, which are not necessarily the goals of equality. And I think they are much more important. If you know, shall we now tell men that they have to do biology because there are too many women studying biology? And women tell them to do engineering because there are too many. That doesn't make any sense. The important thing is that women have the same chances mathematically, to do a successful career in what they want to do, as men in what they want to do. That is the equality of opportunities and of fairness, but not the equality of the final result of having the same number of people, men here than women. I mean, it's again very obvious what I'm saying. I mean,
Okay, thank you. So I guess your question your answer to this question was yes. Okay, now let's take a few questions from the audience. I've got one hand there first.
Just to start with your reply, then get my question. But you can unpick the causality that lies behind why you don't have women going into the harder sciences, and that's the question: what's the causality? Unless you believe that men's brains and women's brains are intrinsically different, then it should be possible at some point. My next question is actually to do with the role of the media. I was just thinking, I don't think I've ever seen a female Formula One driver. I've very rarely seen women golfers on TV, etc., etc. You might widen the question and say, to what extent do the media reinforce stereotypes and do not enough to support the emergence of female athletes, etc., etc.?
Thank you. Could you also introduce yourself so we know who?
I beg your pardon. My name's Chris Brooks. I'm from the UK Health Forum.
Thank you. Okay, please.
Answer your question of causality. I mean, that's an old story. It's the story of nature and nurture. Are we the way we are? And then there are two extremes. Some people would say, well, we are the way we are because women have XX chromosomes and men have XY chromosomes. And that is certainly a difference. So that is a biological difference. Okay. Now, the other people would say, oh, no, we are completely identical. Well, that's not, they can't say. We are relatively identical, and we are different due to, 100,000 years of Homo sapiens. And then 40,000 years ago, we mixed a little with the Neanderthal, as it was mentioned, that species before, and 12,000 years before we discovered agriculture. And in all these times, there was always a certain discrimination towards women. And therefore, they do not have the same chances, and they are today different. Now, nobody has ever been able, and very likely will never be able, to disentangle nature from nurture. My point is what we are today. I mean, we are not going to undo 100,000 years of Homo sapiens. Yeah, well, certainly, we don't know any method of undoing that. Therefore, so to me, my point is what we are today. And there we have the data. As simple as that. Again, very simple.
We have, let's.
Sorry, my point is what we are tomorrow.
Okay. Then there was another question towards media, how media influences stereotypes or not.
I think there has to be a strong commitment to really show the world like it is in all the diversity we have. And if you don't have this as your topic of your company, you will never reach. And we don't have that. Normal companies don't have that. But I've heard an example from a Swedish colleague in our last meeting. And she works for a Swedish small television company. And their goal was that men and women should be shown in television equally. So what they did, they started counting. They counted every day how many minutes you see male, how many minutes you see women, what are the topics, and so on. So I think after it took a while, they always had been like 40 to 60, and then they made it like we count every day, but we count every day by 11 o'clock. By 11 o'clock, we still can change the program. We can say, this story, there are too many men, we have to find a female expert. This story we cannot do, or we can change the things. And ever since then, they have really a parity, 50-50. And if they stop doing it, immediately you see more men. Nobody knows why, but it happens. But there is a method, what I'm saying. It's only about the commitment. And I want to add also, they don't do it because of equal, of gender or something like that. They do it because none of the young women are anymore watching them. And they want to bring the audience back. So it's a good reason for them to do it. Mm. And it works.
Okay, thank you. Do you want? Okay.
No, I would just like to add something quickly to that, which I think what you said is a really good example. But it's not only about how much we show women on TV, women's sports on TV. It's very important how we talk about it. So there is a huge responsibility when it comes to journalists, because I think we could have noticed easily the way that women get a lot of comments on their physicality, their marital status for some reason, their outfits. There like a lot of issues that for some reason are supposed to be interesting, or the when a woman wins something and she has a male coach, it's somehow his great achievement rather than hers, and so on. So I think these two also should go hand in hand.
Okay, let's take a question. I had two. Let's take the one from the front row with you with orange shawl. So you take the question first, please. Yes. The microphone is coming. Oh, there it is.
Hello, my name is Olayemi Chilena. I am the representative of the EU delegation of Make Matters Matter. So I just wanted to make a comment and a question. We've been talking the whole day about equal participation of women in all domains, power, economy, etc. But for me, everything is connected. But if you really want to ensure equal participation of women to men in sports, in power, and everything, you really have to reduce the unpaid care work that actually women are taking. And this is still here, even in Sweden, wherever. I mean, don't even mention Africa or even other countries. So they cannot participate in academia or actually do more works if they cannot have the weekend to write the paper or have more time to do sports. So my question is, so this has to be shared with men and the rest of society. So my question is, what concrete measures do you think you can propose in your field that you can think that they can actually, where this can happen? I know there's something that not the EU can do, but what, according to your opinion, do you think what we could do, we should push for? Thank you.
How could we make a change?
For me, definitely, as I mentioned already, we have this equal opportunity plan going from the top to the bottom, from the bottom to the top, and the quotas, and I'm all for it.
For me, if I would want to give a short answer, I think what you mentioned is very, very important, and especially in the field of sport, I think, because as I mentioned, if women don't even make enough money from sports, they often take another paid job, and somehow sometimes they have to combine it also with education and with childcare, and then it becomes really a lot. I don't know, it's just seems impossible. So from my perspective, it would be the recognition of worker status given to professional athletes or elite level athletes. If there is an economic element linked to your performance, you should have a worker status and have the rights that are correlated to that status, and that includes the maternity protection and the childcare services.
Yeah, I mean, you're completely right. Women have do many other things on average than men, and that, of course, has consequences. I wrote a paper some 5 or 6 or 8 years ago about one of the possible solutions of this problem in academia. And the solution was, I think I called it the improved CV. The solution was basically that you have to take out 5 years of your CV. Men would take out, 5 years of whatever they did, doing their research. And for women, that would be the 5 years they have lost because they had, lost for research because they were doing other things. So that equalized a little bit the chances, and there's a whole discussion about that. So there are measures. I mean, eventually the problem, the measure in the ERC grant system is basically that you don't look anymore at the whole CV, you only look at the top 3 papers. Now, you can, of course, argue that the women who had less time to do, very likely the chances that they had written these very good papers are also smaller. That is certainly true. But you equalize a little bit the chances. I don't think there's a perfect solution today, except that men do the same contribution, but I don't know how to impose that. I'm sorry. That's a question of education. I mean, that we have to, this is a question of education. As by the way, very many of our issues are questions of education. And that is really a subtle issue. I mean, how do we have to shape, how do we have to educate at the kindergarten and primary school, basically? Because once they are in the university, it's too late, What kind of education would be really furthering the equality of genders? That is an interesting issue.
Thank you very much. Now we'll take one final question from here. We have the microphone.
Yeah, I'm Christiane Upper from the Austrian Women Ring and also a part of the European Women's Lobby. There is also one other thing. If one looks at in the research now, and the women are not at the top, there is a big glass ceiling, much more lower than in other professions in the research area, because there's power, there is money, there is connections, and to become a professor is also not so easy. You need many people to lobby you, to get up, and all this is also at times with men, and only quota can help here. We had such an example in the University of Vienna. There was an institute, there were only male professors, then they had an evaluation, and it was made, only the men there, bad reputation. Suddenly, women who were waiting to become professors could become professors. So I would say the quota plays a role here. One needs some measurements how to make it and how to do. The glass ceilings are many. The women want to work and want to become professors, surely.
Okay. With this comment, I would like to thank our panelists. Thank you very much for your contributions and for the very lively discussion that we've had. Unfortunately, there is never enough time for questions, but thank you very much for participating. Before you go, I'd just want to share one anecdote that I was hearing in Euronews earlier this week about from Norway, where they have decided that for the first time and the first country in the world, they actually decided that the football players, the male football players and the female football players would get exactly the same wage. And this was done with a cooperation with the male colleagues who decided that they are willing to go down in their wages in order to reach this equality. So it is possible to do, but it takes some commitment. So as a positive example from our neighbors in Norway. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Davide. Thank you very much.
Now we are coming to the end of our conference. Before we go to our high-level concluding remarks, we will do one final Slido poll. So if we can get that on the screen, please. And now what we will be doing is setting an objective for ourselves towards the next index. We've got 2 years' time. Now we all will go home and start working. And now let's set an objective, which domain of the index we would like to improve most till 2019. You've got the index, the different domains there, so give your vote. Which area would you feel that we'd need to improve most? Intersecting inequalities and time are playing a strong role here. We've got also some votes for power, money, violence. Violence we haven't really covered so much today, but it's an integral part of the index, and we will be hearing more about that in November. So we can very clearly see that time is the area where you would want us to improve, which is good. And this is now a commitment for all of us to look into what we can do about that. So thank you very much for your opinion. Now it's come